Designed by Instructor H with the financial backing of the Winner family, the Gundam Sandrock had one thing that set it apart from the other After Colony Gundams up to that point. They were primarily designed to operate by themselves, while the Gundam Sandrock was made as a commander machine, boasting a bigger V-fin with more powerful communication capabilities. And thanks to its powerful sub-camera, it could even pinpoint enemy locations in situations with nigh zero visibility, for example, in a sandstorm. After all, the desert was what the Sandrock was designed for. It could handle rough terrain with ease, and it could handle both high and low temperatures with no problem. In terms of weapons then, it was no pushover either. It came with 2 head-mounted Vulcans for suppressive fire, shoulder-mounted homing missiles, and 2 heat Shotels, modeled after the Ethiopian Shotel sickle sword. Typically, these superheated blades will be used as traditional swords, but the Sandrock also had other options available to it. They could be thrown in case of emergency, or they could be combined with the shield and the backpack to create a weapon known as the Cross Crusher. Essentially, they now became a giant pincer claw that was described as being powerful enough to crush a tank. I find it quite sad that this implies that crushing a tank is worth more bragging rights than crushing an enemy mobile suit like an Ares or a Leo. Like, I get it, but still. And when not in use, the heat Shotels could be stored on the backpack. Also, if we go by the old no-grade kit, it also came with a beam submachine gun. Its beams were weaker than those of a standard beam rifle, but it did have a higher rate of fire. And when not in use, it could be stored on the back skirt. And after a bit more digging, I was also able to find this concept art of the standard Sandrock using the beam submachine gun. For defensive purposes then, the Sandrock came outfitted with the strongest armor of the 5 OG Gundams, and it also had that aforementioned shield. But this could do more than just block attacks and combine into the Cross Crusher. It could deal a nasty blow to enemies with its fangs, and it also had 2 shield flashers. They were styled to look like eyes of a snake and could unleash a blinding flash of light. And when not in use, it could also be stored on the backpack. And then to increase its defensive capabilities even more, in the comic Bomb Bomb manga, it could also be outfitted with the Diffuser Cloth. This was an anti-beam cloak that was very similar to the anti-beam cloak used by the Sandrock Custom Endless Waltz version, which we'll be talking about later on in this video. If all else failed though, the Sandrock was outfitted with a last resort self-destruct system. But again, this is what set the Sandrock apart from the other Gundams. They simply blew up when you pressed the button, most of the time, but not the Sandrock. Instructor H had installed it with an artificial intelligence called the Alice System Mark II. And when the self-destruct system was activated, this AI would open up the cockpit hatch, urging the pilot to escape, and then walk away from the pilot, ensuring that they wouldn't get caught up in the blast. A very humane design for a mobile suit that was originally meant to participate in an operation that was anything but humane. As mentioned in my previous Gundam Wing development history videos, the original plan of Operation Meteor was to drop a colony onto the Earth, followed by an invasion by the Gundams. They would use the resulting confusion to take over key locations, allowing the colonies to take control of the planet. However, the scientists making those Gundams, and most of the pilots as well, weren't so keen on involving innocent civilians in their revenge plan. Cue the modified Operation Meteor. Now the Gundams would be going in alone, and their targets would be limited to Alliance military facilities. Although in the case of the Sandrock, it wouldn't be quite alone. Piloted by Barba Winner, he would touch down in the desert where he would meet up with some old friends, the Maganac Corps. These guys were an elite Middle Eastern mobile suit corps using the WMS-03 Maganac, a mobile suit that was designed to work together with the Sandrock. In an attempt to fight against the Alliance, several Middle Eastern countries got together to develop this machine. They were purpose-built for desert operations, with strong dust-proofing, hardy materials, and excellent mobility even in the harshest of environments. And because the Winter family had strong ties with these countries, the Maganac was also developed under the assumption that one day the Sandrock would be leading a squadron of them into battle. And fortunately for them, in practice, this worked out even better than they had hoped. Despite the paper specs of the Maganac only being slightly above those of the Leo, in combination with the Sandrock, they were absolutely invincible. And quite literally so. The Maganac Corps had 40 Maganacs, and not a single one of them would be shot down throughout the entire conflict. And while the Maganac wasn't necessarily a development from the Sandrock, Rashid's commander unit did feature shoulder armor that was styled after it, and it also got head-mounted Vulcan guns, which were of course a staple of the Gundams. And then when Catra took the Sandrock into space for the final battles, the Maganacs would follow suit. However, while the Maganacs were able to be adjusted for space combat with just a few minor adjustments, the Sandrock had to be upgraded to the Sandrock Custom, something that would be done by Mike Howard on board of the giant Peace Million spaceship. The unit looks mostly the same, but it got extra thrusters on the shoulders, the back skirt and the backpack, as well as bigger thrusters on the back of the legs. But because of these extra thrusters, in particular the ones on the backpack, it could no longer use the Cross Crusher. All of the other weapons though have remained the same, and the beam machine gun is now officially part of its weapons. The biggest change then would actually be done to the internals, done by fellow Gundam pilot Hiro Yui. Seeing how the White Fang was deploying their mobile dolls in a much more strategical fashion than Oz, he installed a copy of the Zero system into the Sandrock. But rather than for the purpose of just increasing the Sandrock and Catra's combat effectiveness, he installed the Zero system so that he could improve Catra's commanding capabilities, allowing him to effectively lead the Gundam team into battle, who prior to this had been so used to fighting on their own.
This isn't working. We're gonna get totaled.
The enemy's divided into a number of units. Now's our chance to defeat those units one at a time. Troa, attack the troops on the upper right side. Then destroy the front unit, Duo and Wufei.
Roger. Gotcha.
After this battle though, Catra would remove the system, believing that he no longer needed it. And the following battle would prove him quite correct, with a resounding victory for the Gundam team and their allies. But the Sandrock Custom wasn't the only planned update for the standard Sandrock. In the Gundam Wing Perfect album by Comic Bomb Bomb, we are also treated to the Earthquake Naga Gundam and the Thunder Griffon Gundam. First up, the Earthquake Naga Gundam. The most striking difference here is that its lower half has been replaced with a snake-like tail, after its namesake, the snake god Naga. This allowed it to achieve great speeds in the desert, and by retracting its wings, it could apparently even move through the sand. And for its weapons, it came with a heat axe that had a power output comparable to that of the beam scythe, 6 tail-shaped antennas that could deliver a powerful shock to the enemy, and it had the Magnum Cross Crusher. Typically, it was mounted on the left arm, but it could also be attached to the head to transform the Earthquake Naga Gundam into a kind of mobile armor flight mode. In this mode, its wings would allow it to fly, making it resemble a winged serpent, with the Magnum Cross Crusher serving as its main weapon in this mode. Also, while it's not described, it looks to have some kind of blade on the tip of its tail too. Next up then is the Thunder Griffon Gundam. Rather than being a customized Sandrock Gundam, this was a brand new mobile armor designed for the Sandrock to ride on. As its name indicates, this Gundam was modeled after the legendary Griffon and was able to carry the Sandrock into battle, whether it was over land, through the water, or in the air. It greatly increased the Sandrock's mobility, and it was also planned to have a system that could recharge the Sandrock's energy mid-battle. As for the Sandrock itself, it seems to have been mostly unchanged, but the shield did get overhauled, and in addition to the heat show tails, it also got a more knightly looking sword. What isn't mentioned then is how the Thunder Griffon is operated. Is it remote controlled from the cockpit of the Sandrock? Does it have a mobile doll system? Or is it piloted by a human pilot? And if so, who would that pilot even be? We may never know, and we probably will never know. And these were all of the developments of the TV version of the Sandrock. But as I'm sure you're all very well aware, the design of the Sandrock would also get updated for the Endless Waltz OVA/movie, which would then also be used in the Glory of the Losers manga, DTL's Impulse manga, and the Frozen Teardrop light novel. So now, let's have a look at the Sandrock Endless Waltz version. While the story remains mostly the same, the unit did get a very radical redesign, starting with its overall shape. Despite still being the most well-armored Gundam of the bunch, it now looks a lot more streamlined. Instead, it would get its strong back with a set of optional armor called the Armadillo unit. This seriously increased its defensive capabilities, and thanks to the extra boosters of the unit, it also maintained the Sandrock's mobility. And it could also increase the Sandrock's offensive capabilities. In version 1, the shoulders were outfitted with modified shields of the Maganacs, but in version 2, two of the Sandrock's own shields were attached to the shoulders, and they could be equipped with a 40-tube missile pod each. And on top of that, it's also seen with just shoulder armor that could house beam cannons, giving the Sandrock some much needed ranged weaponry. Because that is the one thing where the stock Endless Waltz version is weaker than the stock TV version. It no longer has the homing missiles. But on the flip side, the Endless Waltz version is seen using the beam machine gun. A smaller change to its weapons then are the heat show tails. They're made a bit more elaborate, and the way they connect to the backpack has also been changed. Rather than simply slotting into the sides of the backpack, the handles now fold down and they're holstered into the thruster pods on the backpack. So functionally the same, but more complex. What became better though was how they combined with the shield to form the Cross Crusher. Rather than having the backpack serve as a connection between the show tails and the shield, they now directly connect to the shield, allowing the backpack to remain where it's supposed to be. And the final piece of equipment for the standard Sandrock Endless Waltz version was something that is shared with the Maganac, the high-speed assault equipment. In addition to the Maganacs, the Maganac Corps also had another mobile suit, the very unique looking Oliphant. Because its main purpose was to provide artillery support, it didn't have arms, and the weapons were simply mounted onto its body. And rather than having walking legs, it had thick hovering legs. And it was these legs that were modified into the high-speed assault equipment used by the Sandrock and the Maganac Corps for their attack on the new Edwards base. Not only does it increase their speed and mobility, but it also mounts some extra weapons too. For its upgrade to the Sandrock Custom then, it really depends on where you look. In the OVA, one of the only changes was its color scheme, which is now darker and I guess more fitting for space. It also got an optional anti-beam cloak, which not just protected it from beam weapons, but also allowed it to undergo atmospheric re-entry. And the final change was actually a downgrade. The only weapons it still had were its head Vulcans and the heat show tails. The 1/144 scale fighting action model kit then would add a shield to the Sandrock Customs arsenal, continuing the trend of Sandrock Gunpla being better equipped than their anime counterparts. The shield could house the heat show tails to form the Cross Crusher, but it no longer had these shield flashers. In the Glory of the Losers manga then, the Sandrock Custom came to be in 2 phases, so to speak. After it was self-destructed, it was patched up and repainted in the darker color scheme that we associate with the Sandrock Custom. Plus, it was given a more powerful beam rifle that was based on the Wing Zero's Buster rifle. When it went into space then, it was modified for space combat on board of the Peace Million. Its backpack was remodeled with new and stronger thrusters, and it was now also officially rechristened to the Sandrock Custom. And this version would keep the shield with the shield flashers. But whether you go with the OVA version, the model kit version, or the manga version, this would be the Sandrock Custom fighting through the final battles of the Eve Wars, and later also through the events of Mighty Meia's Rebellion, after which it would be self-destructed in the name of an everlasting peace. We'll get back to this in a second. First, we have to talk about the Gundam Sandleon. Seeing the overwhelming power of the 5 Gundams, the pro-war faction of the Romefeller Foundation began a top-secret project to mass-produce them. And their mass-production version of the Sandrock was the Sandleon. The biggest visual change was that its color scheme was changed to beige and brown, but its main weapon also received a very interesting performance change. The regular Sandrock had the heat show tells, so that they could become superheated and therefore cut better. For the Sandleon, the Romefeller Foundation tried going with the opposite approach, and gave it high cold show tells. These could be chilled to absolute zero, freezing and shattering anything that they came into contact with. And instead of being handheld, they were mounted on the lower arms. What remained the same then were the head-mounted Vulcan guns. One Sandleon would be used by former ace pilot Doppelt in pursuit of the stolen wing Gundam Seraphim, but it would get damaged during the mission. And in order to continue this mission, it would be patched up with prototype parts from the Gundam Asclepius, which were located in a nearby mobile suit graveyard. It got the legs, the arms, and also the shoulder armor of the Asclepius, meaning that while it couldn't fully transform into the close combat mode, the arms could still transform, giving the Sandleon Custom access to 4 beam cannons. And when in this mode, the high cold show tells could be stored on the backpack, or at least that's what it looks like in this picture. Despite being a very powerful machine though, it would again be defeated. Which then brings us to the Frozen Teardrop light novels. Here we would be introduced to the Scheherezade, a prototype machine for the Sandrock that was built sometime after the creation of the Wing Zero. Just like the Sandrock, it was armed with heat show tells, and it would be tested out by Lucrezia 9 of all people. It would also be used by Catra himself, and it would apparently see some action during the Second Lunar War. After this conflict though, it would be taken apart and stored inside of a secret hangar on a Winner family resource satellite. Here it would remain for many years, together with 3 other prototypes, until they were rediscovered by Catra and Troa. In desperate need of new mobile suits, they set out to rebuild and modernize these machines. Catra, now going under the pseudonym Instructor W, worked on the Snow White and Warlock, assumed to be the prototypes for the Wing and the Death Scythe, and Troa, now going under the pseudonym Dr. T, would work on the Prometheus and Scheherezade, assumed to be the prototypes for the Heavy Arms and the Sandrock. So ironically enough, it wouldn't be Catra working on the Sandrock prototype, but Troa. And unfortunately for the Scheherezade, just like with the Prometheus, it would lag behind the 2 machines being restored by Catra. The Scheherezade was supposed to be outfitted with a Shamsir, a curved Persian sword, but due to a problem with the weapon handling software, the Scheherezade couldn't correctly hold it, and instead it would be equipped with a Jambia, a short curved dagger hailing from Yemen. And instead of being made out of Gundanium alloy, this dagger was made out of MG alloy, which was even stronger, yet lighter. The Scheherazade's biggest strength then was its movement program. Its close combat capabilities were second to none, and its movements were so fluid that they were compared to belly dancing. Troa himself called the mobile suit the Dancing Assassin. And it could also be equipped with an optical camouflage cloak for extra stealth. And that was all for the Sandrock's development history. A hardy desert mobile suit that excelled at close combat and served as a command unit for not just the Gundam team, but for the undefeated Maganac Corps too. It might not be the most popular Gundam around, but there's no denying that it was a very impressive mobile suit nonetheless. So let me know down below which one you prefer. The more chonky, armored looking TV version, or the more lean Endless Waltz redesign. As always, a big thank you to the Patreon supporters. I hope everyone watching has a great day, and I'll see you all next time.